Oh boy, I know that this player is good, and you know this player is good. Today we're talking about the best player in the National Hockey League, and a guy that has slowly started to enter that conversation of being one of the best players of all time. Not the best, but one of the best. And in this video, what I wanted to do was talk about the comments made by yet another player who happens to be one of the best of all time, regarding the initial guy. So, without further ado, we're talking today about Connor McDavid, the NHL's golden boy, the guy who has the most points out of anybody you could even imagine in this generation's worth of play. Connor McDavid is a franchise, generational defining superstar, and there was an article that came out earlier last week going over some comments made by yet another GOAT, Sidney Crosby, as to what McDavid could accomplish next. Now, before we proceed, let's just kind of take a look at the profile here. So McDavid last season, we know he had 150 plus points. If you wanted to get more exact, 153. And just acknowledging that this was the 15th best season an NHL player has ever played, and there are only 3 names in NHL history who've produced more points in one season than McDavid. Those names being Steve Yzerman, Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky. No big deal, right? No big deal. It makes it even more impressive when you acknowledge that Connor McDavid literally did all of this in 22-23. Years after some of these other guys were posting up monster seasons. Mario Lemieux's last 160-point year came in 1995-1996, so that was nearly 30 years ago. Connor McDavid is doing things that no NHL player has done in decades, and if he continues getting better, which is kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible for him to get better, but the guy is 25, he's smack dab in the middle of his prime. Maybe there's room to get a little bit more points, maybe there isn't, who really knows, but for Connor McDavid, if he keeps this up for the rest of his NHL career, which I have no doubt he has the capacity to do so, this will cement him in that conversation with the Marios, with the Waynes, with the Gordys, with everybody else whom you could say is in that conversation too. McDavid has had a better point production season than all these other guys who are not named Mario, Steve, or Wayne. And even for Yzerman, the guy only had 2 more points than McDavid did. So Connor McDavid's good, I don't think you needed me to tell you that, but if we go over onto this article on NHL.com, it goes over what Sidney Crosby says in regards to betting against McDavid. The article title says this: Crosby won't bet against McDavid eclipsing 170 points this year. The Penguins captain says he still believes the Oilers center is the best player in the National Hockey League. And it's kind of crazy when you read that subheadline, because when I read this, I immediately think back to 2018, 2019, when I was in my freshman year in college, and I think about the conversations I would have with my classmates, because back in this time frame, 2018, for example, we were still debating amongst ourselves, who's the best player in the NHL? Is it McDavid or is it Crosby? Where you have this young new guy who's faster, who's got a great playmaking ability, and who's just dominant in the game like McDavid, and you have this older vet that can just do everything so well. In Crosby, you get yourselves a kind of Curry versus LeBron argument in a way. And don't worry, all you basketball fans, I'm not going to go and die by that comparison. I just wanted to say it because I thought it sounded cool. But Connor McDavid in this time frame was still at only 2 100-point seasons. He posted up 4 since then, but back in 2018, he only had 2 100-point years, and there was still a very valid debate that would go on as to whether or not Crosby or McDavid was 1 or 2. Now, Crosby has gotten a bit older, his point production has declined a tad, it's still great, of course he's still amazing, but Sidney Crosby is not getting 100 points like he had in the past, it's just a little bit different now. So to hear him say definitively that McDavid is number 1, that is kind of a mind-blown opportunity for me, but either way, if we continue on to this article written by Mike Zaisberger, by the way, link in the description if you want to read more yourself. The article says this, that McDavid had 153 points in 82 games last season, the most in the NHL since Lemieux's 161 in 95-96. And Sidney Crosby said he could see McDavid finishing with more than 170 points this year. No player has had more than 170 since Lemieux had 199 with the Penguins in 88-89. I mean, I didn't think 150 was going to be in the cards for him, but he found a way to get there, Crosby said, so I don't think anything is out of the question for him as far as numbers are concerned. He just finds a way to find another level time and time again, so I would never bet against him. And the thing is, like, when I read this, I was already saying to myself, dude, Crosby, what a G. Like, what an absolute legend for Crosby to be able to endorse a guy like that. Passing the torch, right? Because for maybe like a decade plus, especially with all those Stanley Cups, Sidney Crosby was widely regarded as the best player in the NHL. You had the Ovechkins that were challenging him with the goal scoring, the Malkins that were challenging him on his own team, the Claude Giroux challenging him interdivisionally, and then you had other players inserting their names around there. The Patrick Kanes, the Sedins, the Getzlavs, the Perrys. There were so many great players in this era, but Crosby was consistently the number one. And if you take a look at Sid the Kid's career, that guy has not had a 150-point season. Spoiler alert, his peak came earlier in his career when he achieved 120 points in 06-07. Now, he has had a few 100-point seasons since then, but when it comes to the McDavid point production metric, I mean, 150 is absolutely bananas. Who would have thought last year, at the start of last year, that Connor McDavid would be scoring 60 goals and almost 90 assists? Like, that is just mind-bogglingly good. So for Sidney to go out there and say, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to bet against the guy. If he gets 170, like, that's honestly not something I would bet against. Like, that is even more crazy. This article then goes out there and talks about Sidney Crosby's career, talks about the McDavid career as well, all the trophies and everything. The article then says this: in 2018, Crosby, who himself has won the Hart Trophy twice, the Ted Lindsay 3 times, and the Maurice Richard twice, told NHL.com that he considered McDavid the best player in the NHL. 5 years later, that opinion has not changed. Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that one. I mean, you've got Nate and Leon and some other guys who are right there, but I think McDavid has proven that. Part of the reason this interview is pretty cool is because at the end it talks also about the NHL's idea of getting back into best on best international competition, and Crosby had this to say about that: the chance to play with Connor McDavid, and for that matter, some other guys, would be cool too. It's a pretty amazing honor to play for Team Canada and to be with the best players in the world competing. Just seeing that level of hockey, it's impressive and it's fun, and it's hockey at its finest. Hopefully we get that opportunity. So Crosby goes out there and ends this entire thing by saying what we've all been saying. We want to see McDavid and Crosby on a line together, maybe even add Connor Bedard there. If you have an Olympics championship team with that first line, McDavid, Crosby, Bedard, somehow, like, have 3 generational superstars on one line together for Team Canada, that sounds like the ultimate pipe dream, something that we could only create in our hockey ultimate teams and not something that would ever manifest in reality. But if the NHL does go to the Olympics sometime, if Crosby is still kicking around, if Bedard is as good as he is advertised, then why not have it happen? I mean, at the end of the day, if Crosby is going out there and saying all this about McDavid, yeah, the guy is so good I won't bet against him to get 170 points, like, we already know where his philosophy would be at. He'd probably love to do it. Connor Bedard, same thing. Connor McDavid, probably the same thing. I mean, it is kind of interesting to make this video just because it's just kind of going over some comments made, but at the end of the day, if you wanted my take on this, could Connor McDavid score 170? Yeah, I think he could. It's possible, right? I mean, all he needs is 20 more points. What's 20 more points over the span of 82 games? That's a point every 4 games extra, right? That's not that bad. He was already averaging 1.8 something points per game. What's a little bit more on top of that? The guy was so above and beyond crazy that even getting like 164 points, for example, getting a 2-point per game metric, it does not seem terribly impossible, but at the same time, you know, the feats, they're just rising even higher. Higher highs and higher lows, right? So for Connor McDavid, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How many points does he finish with? A lot of these fantasy rankings and all that are pointing out that they project him to have maybe 140, 130, 145-ish. Like, there are some rankings that are being a bit more conservative and saying that he'll probably decline a tad. Leon has a ranking of around 120 and stuff too, but yeah, for McDavid, if 170 is in the cards, then we'll wait and see for that to occur. Thoughts in the comment section below. How many points do you think McDavid gets? Also, talk to me in the comments about Crosby and him talking about this in the way that he did. Is this not super cool? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.